Hello, I'm Teresa Longo, the Executive Director of the Reeves Center for International Studies. Welcome back. The Reeves Center was founded in 1989 when William and Mary was laying significant groundwork for internationalization. At about the same time, our panelists, now with very distinguished careers, were undergraduate students. I look forward to introducing them in just a few minutes. First, a few words about Reeves' early history. The center is named after its benefactors, Emory and Wendy Reeves. Their portraits are in this room, as is Emory Reeves' book, The Anatomy of Peace. Wendy Reeves came to us through Mr. Frank Schatz. We are fortunate to have him in the audience with us today. This year, the Virginia Commonwealth Senate and House passed a resolution stating their admiration for Mr. Schatz for inspiring citizens of Virginia with accounts of his remarkable life. This is not the first honor he has received from the Commonwealth. An earlier resolution, awarded in 2001, recognized his role in the establishment of a world-class Center for International Studies. Thank you, Frank, for that early foundational work and for being with us today. That center was the Reeves Center. Today, Reeves is known as the hub for global engagement. We are home to the Global Education Office and the Office of International Students, Scholars, and Programs. We are working to make William and Mary a global university. A few accomplishments to note so far. Reeves has made it possible for William and Mary to rank as the top public university for undergraduate study abroad participation, with 60% of students studying or conducting research abroad by graduation. Each year, Reeves makes it possible for hundreds of international students and scholars to teach, conduct research, work, and call William and Mary home. Through our lecture series and faculty research initiatives, Reeves is the center where critical issues are studied and new knowledge is created from a global point of view. Our panelists today lived in Reeves Hall. Two of them were even roommates. They spent time in this room, met Wendy Reeves here, and were mentored by Professor Jim Bill, Reeves' first director. We are so pleased they have decided to reconnect with us and with each other for this panel on international careers. I know we are all eager to learn about their work and their international perspectives. So on that note, I will introduce the panel. Our moderator, Ducey Lay, class of 1994, serves as Assistant Director at the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, D.C., where she oversees 20 attorneys, economists, analysts, and managers, enforcing financial consumer protection laws and conducting mergers and acquisitions analysis. In 2013, Ducey served as Associate General Counsel for Capital One in its headquarters in McLean, Virginia. There, she led the company's regulatory policy team. Prior to her time at Capital One, Ducey was an attorney at the Federal Reserve Board, where her responsibilities included drafting regulations and guidance. Ducey began her legal career as an attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice and spent her law school summers interning at the Bangkok office of Baker & McKenzie and working with asylum seekers in the Hong Kong refugee camps. Ducey received her JD from the Georgetown University Law Center and her BBA from William and Mary. Dr. Chai Shen Kwa, class of 1994, is the Morton Arboretum's urban tree science leader. She works with a wide range of stakeholders on projects related to urban tree research and management. Chai Shen is currently leading the 2020 Chicago Region Tree Census, working closely with the Chicago Region Trees Initiative and the Center for Tree Science. She is also an adjunct associate professor at the Shanghai Engineering Research Center of Urban Tree Ecology and Applications, where she works with colleagues on developing science-based urban tree management strategies. Her efforts to develop and improve relationships with partners in China resulted in a signed memorandum of understanding aimed at expanding professional exchanges and collaborations on urban tree research. Some of the many projects she has developed with academic and industry partners include a pilot study monitoring tree water use with real-time smart sap flow sensors. Jonathan Noble, class of 1994, is Senior Assistant Provost for Internationalization at Notre Dame. He leads Notre Dame International's global research, international partnerships, and advancement, and serves as the university's regional leader for Asia and Europe. Noble is a teaching professor for Notre Dame International, an advisor for the School of Global Affairs, an associate of the university's Global Advancement Team, and a faculty fellow of the Kellogg Institute for International Studies, the Liu Institute for Asian and Asian Studies, and the Initiative for Global Development. As Assistant Provost for Asia between 2012 and 2017, he was the founding director of the Beijing Global Gateway and founder of the Greater China Scholars Program. Focusing his research and teaching on contemporary Chinese culture and society, Noble is the author of over 50 articles, essays, and translations, and was one of 20 China scholars in the United States selected in 2005 to participate in the inaugural Public Intellectuals Program sponsored by the National Committee on United States-China Relations. Noble holds a PhD in East Asian Languages and Literatures from The Ohio State University and a BA in East Asian Studies from William and Mary. Ken Baer, class of 1993, is a captain in the Texas Army National Guard. He grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, and graduated from William and Mary with an interdisciplinary degree in political philosophy. He pursued graduate study in philosophy at the University of Pennsylvania, dropping out after 3 years. He enlisted in the United States Army in 1996 as a combat engineer. He was stationed in Louisiana and Germany with peacekeeping deployments to Bosnia and Kosovo. After leaving active duty, he returned to Delaware and joined the Pennsylvania Army National Guard. He deployed to Iraq in 2004-2005 and to Afghanistan in 2008. After commissioning as an engineer officer, he deployed to Kuwait in 2012-2013. He then moved to Austin and transferred to the Texas Army National Guard. From 2017 to 2020, he commanded a combat engineer company. His command time included service on Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Most recently, he deployed again to Kuwait as a staff officer with the 36th Infantry Division. His interests include running, history, French, travel, and long walks to and from Whole Foods. He is currently working on his first novel. Claire Eamon, class of 1994, is an expert on international development with over 20 years of experience working on global democracy issues. As the division chief for civil society and media in USAID's Center of Excellence on Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance, Ms. Eamon and her team provide technical expertise and analysis to USAID missions worldwide and manage programming totaling over $170 million related to civil society, media, labor, technology, youth, internet freedom, and community philanthropy. Her most recent portfolio includes shaping President Obama's Stand with Civil Society agenda, a multi-year agenda to galvanize diverse partners, including civil society and new actors, including the philanthropic community and the private sector, to promote more democratic laws and practices to protect freedom of association and assembly. This effort is helping foster an open environment for civil society and reverse the trend of growing restrictions on civic space. Over the past year, Ms. Eamon developed the Civil Society Innovation Initiative, a $60 million public-private partnership to create 6 networked regional civil society innovation hubs. At USAID, Ms. Eamon also served as the deputy team lead for democracy and society Democracy and Governance, in the Bureau for Asia Near East Affairs, as well as the Senior Civil Society, Advisor and Central Asia Desk Officer in the Bureau for Europe and Eurasia. Please join me in welcoming this talented and incredibly accomplished panel.
All right, so thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you, Kate and Tyler and other staff from Reeves and William & Mary for this honor and for welcoming everyone here to a Reeves homecoming. It's a pleasure and honor for all of us to be back here. I think I'll just add on to the glowing intro. Thank you, Teresa, for that. We'll get into the dirty secrets of everyone's history here. But just to give you a taste, when Chai Shin was living at Reeves, she was an international student from Malaysia, majoring in, I think you were majoring in biology with a minor in music. Mm-hmm. And then next to her is John. John, you were an in-state Virginia student, majoring in East Asian studies. And then Claire and I were roommates. You were from New York and majoring in English. Right. And then Ken, you were from Delaware, political philosophy. So as you can see, a lot of different backgrounds in STEM, in academia, in government, and in military here. And so we're excited to talk about, in the spirit of Reeves, talk about the different career paths in the international arena. But before we do that, we actually want to know who all of you are, because we know you have wonderful career paths and interest and backgrounds. And for those on Zoom, Vanessa Estella, class of 94, when we were at Reeves, she was from Guam, studying in government. She is monitoring Zoom, so for those of you on Zoom, feel free to chat, enter your questions, and we'll be checking in with Vanessa every so often to see what's going on there. But if we could just go around the room and just each person talk your name and your relationship to William & Mary or Reeves, it would be great to know who all of you are. Mr. Schatz, if we could just start with you. Do you? Okay. Well, you introduced him, Mr. Schatz, who is critical to the Reeves Center. So it's nice to meet you, Mr. Schatz. Oh, the mask. I'm sorry. Yes. And then.
Should we stand up?
Sure.
Now, is there a camera taking pictures? Okay. I just
Video over there.
I'd like to tell you, I'm Joel Levine. I am a professor in the Department of Joel Levine, a professor in the Department of Applied Science at the College of William & Mary. I spent 41 years at NASA, where I was chief scientist for the Mars Exploration Program. And my connection with Reeves is through Frank Schatz, who's a good friend. But also a few years ago, Steve Hansen asked me to talk about sending humans to Mars in a joint program with Moscow State University. So I've been here before, and it's a pleasure to be back.
Hi, my name is Fontan, and I'm a class of 94 with the distinguished guest speakers up there. And I also lived here in Reeves for about 2 years as well. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Rathbun and my wife Jane, and we're here for the presentation because most importantly of all, Deucey's sister is married to our son. And I'm on the Board of Visitors of William & Mary.
Hello, my name is Hanako Doherty. I am class of 1996. I am also alumni of Reeves Hall. I was also the coffee hour chair my senior year.
I'm Ellen Juronzik, and my connection is I'm a friend and guest of Frank Schatz. I'm a native Virginian, have lived all over the country, did not go to William & Mary.
I'm Nancy Bond, and I am been a longtime fan of William and Mary. I think it's the most extraordinary collection of human beings and human spirits, and I think that the Reeves Center is a natural, necessary outgrowth of that spirit and the incoming spirit. And I think we have Frank Schatz to thank for the existence of the Reeves Center. So.
I'm Thomas Liu. I'm currently a senior at William & Mary, and Natalie here and I, we run the Global Innovation Challenge, and we're actually hosting an event with the Reeves Center and the Whole of Government Center of Excellence next month in November with NATO ACT, focused on a cybersecurity case competition for students at William & Mary, United States, and other NATO nations.
My name is Natalie Perez. I'm majoring in government, minoring in philosophy, a class of 2022, as Tommy said. And I'm also part of WMJIC. I'm the second co-lead for coordinating the NATO ACT and WMJIC event that we're going to have in November.
I'm Peter Jones, class of 94, and I'm married to Claire Eamon. And these are our 3 kids here with us. So.
And you lived in Reeves.
And I lived in Reeves in 93, yeah.
Hello, my name is Pei Wang. I'm an international LLM student. I enrolled at the year of 2021.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Estella, class of 94. I lived in Reeves for 2 years. Chai Shen was my roommate. I haven't seen her in over 25 years. and I haven't seen most of these people in over 25 years, but to come this weekend and meet up together, it was like we never left. So it's awesome to see these people again, lifelong friends. So thank you for having us over.
So thank you for the introductions. We're so glad that each and every one of you are here. I guess it'd be remiss for me to say that want to definitely thank all of our panelists here. I think Chai Shin flew in from Chicago. John, you flew in from wherever Notre Dame is. Ken flew.
It's close to Chicago.
Oh, okay, close to Chicago. Okay, it doesn't matter. Ken flew in from Austin. And Claire and Peter, they drove up drove down from Northern Virginia, but they are sharing their 20th wedding anniversary this weekend, and they're sharing it with all of you. So we are very honored. Oh, and I got to say, and then Vanessa flew in from California on the red eye yesterday. So she's, so we're all excited and honored to be here. So with this, in the spirit of Reeves, we do want to talk about international career paths. And I think the first question I have for all of you is, what do you do for a living? What do you do for a living, and what did you do after leaving William & Mary to get to this point in your career? So maybe we'll just start from Chai Shin and then work our way forward.
Yeah, as you know, I am currently the urban tree science leader at the Morton Arboretum in suburb of Chicago. And if you were to tell me that I would be working with trees, like when I was a student here, I would say, no way. You know, I know nothing about trees. I came here to study human genetics and biology, and then I went on to grad school in the UK to do my master's degree in human genetics. And then I went back to Malaysia to start a PhD in cancer research on the island of Borneo. But somehow when I was in Borneo, there were many things that happened, including forest fire, financial crisis in the 90s, and I came back to the US. And the reason why I came back is mainly I met a botanist there. And then I started studying trees because DNA is DNA. It's like just the 4 letters. Whether it's human or trees, the technology is transferable. So I started working on plants and trees. And then we moved to China and worked in a botanical garden. Part of the reason was because I want our kids to learn Chinese. So we moved to Sichuanbana Botanical Garden near the border of Laos in southwest China, working for the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And I was a faculty while doing my PhD. And there's that kind of flexibility in the Chinese education system. And so, yeah, and then after that, we came back to the US and lived in Texas for a little bit, and then we moved to Chicago. And that is 30 years in less than 4 minutes, I hope.
Thank you, John.
If I may, a few things to add to Chai Shen's accomplishments. One is that she is an incredible pianist. And while we were students here, I think we created a duet.
Yes.
I played the clarinet, a duet focused on DNA. Somehow we integrated DNA into the composition of the piece. Also, I was studying Mandarin Chinese as a student at William and Mary, and I think I passed because of Chai Shen.
I didn't know that.
So she kept me motivated to study every day. So when I graduated from William and Mary in 1994, I went immediately into graduate school and received then my PhD in East Asian languages and literatures. 9 years later, 2003, I had conducted research in Beijing for 4 years. During that time, Chai Shen and I randomly ran into each other in what was called at the time Xinjiang Village. And of course, Xinjiang is in the news quite a bit these days. After finishing my PhD, I was hired by the University of Notre Dame to teach about China. And my research is primarily focused on underground Chinese cinema, so cinema film that was made illegally in China, and also experimental theater. After teaching for a few years, the university's provost thought that maybe I wasn't a very good teacher, perhaps, but invited me to lead the university's Asia initiatives. And that meant expanding the University of Notre Dame's engagement and educational programs related to Asia. Several years later, the office similar to Reeves at the University of Notre Dame called Notre Dame International was established. I became, as noted in my biography, Assistant Provost for Asia. I'm now Senior Assistant Provost for Internationalization. The University of Notre Dame has a network of centers around the world, and currently I manage those centers located in London and Rome, Mumbai, Beijing, and Hong Kong. In the earlier days of working at Notre Dame, I helped set up the university's first institute focused on Asia and Asian studies. It's called the Liu Institute for Asia and Asian Studies, developed international scholarship programs, and set up the university centers in Mumbai, Beijing, and Hong Kong. I really owe all of this to Reeves. I was, of course, greatly, and William and Mary, greatly inspired by the time I had as a student here, and I really have never left. My intellectual trajectory, personal trajectory, and professional trajectory are so very much aligned with the experiences that I had here as a student. So thank you, Reeves.
Thank you, John. Actually, I just want to make sure I make the state that for those on Zoom, Vanessa is monitoring the Zoom, if you want to introduce yourself on Zoom, let people know where you are emailing or Zooming in from, and if you have an international career, just to also put that in the Zoom, and we'll check in with Vanessa along the way, too. Sorry, thank you, Claire.
Great.
Thank you, and thanks, John. And I think a lot of us feel the same way, that a lot of our career trajectory, right? We really do see it and tie it back to here at the Reeves Center. So my name is Claire Eamon. I work for the U.S. Agency for International Development. So that's the U.S. government's arm for foreign aid. We do humanitarian assistance, but also international development in many, many sectors, including health and education, and then also democracy, human rights, and governance, where I worked. But definitely, I was definitely influenced by the 2 years that I lived in Reeves, and I knew I wanted to do something international after undergrad, and so I had a Fulbright scholarship to study African cinema. Cinema connection. Actually, in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou, there is every 2 years a Pan-African film festival there, and so it was a really great experience being able to study and also, sort of learn about living in a different culture and speak French. So then I came back and I worked, I sort of knew, I wasn't sure I wanted to go into cinema, but I had met people working in international development. So I worked for a nonprofit organization that worked on sort of nonviolent conflict. And then I realized also if you want to work in the international development space, most people do have a master's degree. So I did go back and got my master's in public affairs from Princeton University. And after Princeton, again, I was looking for jobs, and I found something called the Presidential Management Fellows Program. This is a program that you can only apply for it coming out of your master's degree, but it's a really great way to get into the federal government. And I thought, well, I'll try this, maybe a couple years. And now it's 21 years later, and I'm still in the government. And definitely working in the public sector, it's just very interesting. Even an organization like USAID, it's about 11,000 people worldwide, 5,000 domestic. So it's sort of big enough that you can really move around in your career. So at USAID, I've worked on different regions, Europe and Eurasia, Asia, the Middle East. I've worked on different sectors. So I've worked on democracy and human rights and governance. And now actually I work, I'm the Deputy Director for Management Services. And so I'm working actually on all of our workforce safety plans and really thinking about how we're gonna, all of our staff, we've been teleworking since March of 2020, thinking about how we can have a safe reentry back, and also just thinking about the future of work. I think a lot of us don't necessarily want to go back to the same 5 days a week commuting. And so I think it's a really interesting time sort of thinking about what should our buildings be for, what should our telework be for, sort of what is the new future. And definitely I think it's something we want to shape. So that's what I'm doing now. So it's sort of, again, working in the government, there's so many different things you could possibly work on.
So I have to start by saying I'm not here speaking officially on behalf of the Department of Defense or the Texas Military Department. And I'm not here to recruit anybody. I do want to encourage maybe a greater awareness of the role that the reserve component plays in our military. When I was living in Reeves, I did not dream about joining the military. But 3 years into grad school in philosophy, I dropped out. There's no nicer way of putting that. And for the lack of any obvious alternatives, I enlisted in the United States Army as a combat engineer. There are not very many William & Mary graduates who have enlisted as combat engineers in the Army. It's not one of the brainier jobs to do. However, in my basic training unit of 150 soldiers, near the end of basic training, one guy came up to me, asked me where I went to school, and I said, William & Mary. He said, oh, no way. What year? I said, 93. He said, no way. Yeah, so he also was a 93 William & Mary graduate. We'd actually met a couple of times, it turns out. So very short list of people, but we happened to be in the same basic training unit. After 6 years, I went into the Guard. And it's been a sort of career for me, and it's been sort of an international career. I've been able to go to parts of the world that I most likely never would have gone otherwise. So I'm what's called an M-Day or traditional guardsman. That means that I have to do a minimum of 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks every year of training. For many, if not most people in the reserve component, we usually do a lot more time than that, and that includes active duty deployments. What typically you'll see nowadays, like in the last 20 years, is most reservists, they do maybe one active duty deployment, which is about a bit under a year total of active duty time, about every 5 years. Over a third of our uniformed service members across all the branches, over a third are in the reserve component. On the Army side, there's actually more soldiers in the Army Reserve and the National Guard than there is in the active duty force. In every conflict we've been in, the reserves have been a major part of it. The exception was the Vietnam War. In the Vietnam War, very few National Guard units were sent to Vietnam. People joined the National Guard so that they would not be subject to the draft. But since then, certainly since 9/11, the reserves have played a big role. When I was in Iraq in 2005, nearly half of all U.S. forces in Iraq and the Persian Gulf theater were reserve components. So it's something I think that a lot of people are not aware of, and I think it's also something a lot of people don't consider. They don't consider the possibility of that as a career. So it's for me, it's been a very it's had its frustrations. There's a lot of things that make you want to scream when you're in the military, but it's been a very enriching, worthwhile experience for me.
Well, thank you all. Vanessa, anybody on Zoom or anything on Zoom? Okay. Yeah, actually, for those of you who have international careers, if you want to share also your career paths for the sake of the students and others on Zoom who want to hear about options. Okay. And of course, during the reception, we'd all love to continue this discussion too. So this is not a one-time thing. We have the reception, and of course, after this day too, as we leave, the room today, we hopefully will be able to continue having conversations. So for the sake of all the students, wanted to get your thoughts on advice and recommendations you would have for students interested in your area of expertise, going into your area of work. And maybe if we could start with John and then just go down and end with Chai-Shin. John, so a student interested in being where you are today, what would they do and what's your advice?
Sure. In the area of the internationalization of higher education, I think we can look at the past and see the enormous growth, for example, of the increase of international students studying in the United States from a few thousand students in the 1950s to over 1 million today. And that trajectory is likely to continue. In terms of students who are studying abroad, also if you look at the numbers from the 50s, 50,000 or so students studying abroad, and that has changed to over 300,000 today and increasing. So I think in the internationalization, one can see, although there are certain immediate threats to global mobility, and we need to, I would argue, continue to help promote mobility between countries for education. The opportunities for being involved in the international dimension of higher education, I would say, is enormous. So one, thinking about advice, I would say look at, and to Claire's point, think about the future of work. Think about the future of higher education. If you're interested in international, then the future of the international dimension of higher education. There are certain sources one could look at. There are professional organizations such as NAFSA for international educators that you can learn from the resources on that website. You can attend many virtual events these days. In fact, it's easier now to connect to these organizations than ever before because there are so many online virtual events, of course, hosted from the United States, but also the Europe and Asia and all over the world. Other organizations, for example, IIE, Institute for International Education. They put out a very important annual Open Doors report. There are many resources on the website. I would say if you're interested in looking at the future of higher education, read the Chronicle of Higher Education. You can get, I'm sure the library at William & Mary, you could get that online. But I think the interesting thing here is think about the future of higher education. The other point I just wanted to emphasize is mentorship is so important. Don't be shy in terms of developing a network of mentors for yourself. This can be helpful for career professional discernment when you're facing questions or challenges about your direction. The mentors can be extraordinarily helpful. And this, of course, for students is applicable, but early in your career and throughout your career, mentors can be extremely important. I think I'm out of time, so, but if there's more time later, I would like to comment too about some of the future trends in higher education and internationalization of higher education. But I'll stop here.
Oh, great.
May I ask a question? I would like to ask each of you, what is the special ingredient that you took away in your education from William and Mary, but you may not get it anywhere else?
Thank you. So I'll repeat this for the Zoom. So Mr. Schatz asked, what is the special ingredient that you took away from your William & Mary education, and maybe probably even at Reeves, that you cannot get anywhere else? Who wants to go with that challenging question? Who wants to go first?
Maybe I will go first. So I came from Malaysia, and it was like a British-style education. And then I was thinking about going to college in the UK as well, and I was accepted to quite a few colleges over there. But I chose to come to William & Mary because of the liberal arts education that allowed me, because I guess also because I wasn't quite sure what I want to become. I wanted to have this flexibility and to kind of try out different things and enjoy different things, you know. And I was telling Ducey at lunch just now, one of the best class that I've taken at William & Mary was the harpsichord and pipe organ class. So one time I was at the pipe organ at the, I think Presbyterian Church or whatever on Richmond Road, waiting for my professor to show up. And my professor also was the court musician for the governor's palace. And so he showed up in his outfit with tights and poet shirts and a jacket and hat and a walking stick. And, you know, it's just so amazing, like as if you're being transported back into the colonial time. I don't know, yeah. So I just thought that was kind of a really interesting and experience that probably you can't find anywhere else, yeah.
So it's not very original, but I definitely would say the people that I met. So I definitely, the friends that I made at William & Mary, both my freshman year, were all still in contact. And during the pandemic, we would have these weekly Zooms together. And then also the experience living in Reeves, because it was residential and because, you know, you'd be in class with people, but actually because you live together, we would hang out in the kitchen. You're sort of always together, and it's really the way you get to really get to know people and make really good friends. And then, you know, Ducey has since instituted a Reeves Zoom, and that's how, you know, I really want to give Ducey a lot of credit because she really has brought all of us together. So it's really, I think it's been that sort of the people that we got to meet and the experience of kind of being able to live together was one of the most special things.
I would add, just along those lines, it's the community. The professors who are teaching us day to day, but also open door policy. We, like along what John was saying, you come and talk to them. They are willing to talk to you. and brainstorm with you and, talk about your future, talk about your past, talk about, what your intellectual curiosities are. The friends here, like Claire said, not only are they lifelong friends, but they are intellectually curious. They push you to think harder, but they're also kind. There's just a kindness, a generosity of time and intellect that I think is that in this community at William and Mary, that when I go out in the world, it's something that I come back to because it's comforting. It's definitely very comforting. Anybody else?
Yeah, for me, my experience studying in Beijing as a junior was absolutely transformational and phenomenal. In fact, I was admitted to transfer to Juilliard because I was also a musician. And when I was in China, I was having such a phenomenal experience. I said, no, I am staying with William and Mary. And I returned and I lived in Reves. And it's the combination of the community, the care for the intellectual development of each student. And I think there's a sense of service. I'm not exactly sure how to articulate it. But really, all of us here are serving in the government or through higher education or NGOs in different ways. So there's a sense of serving the community for hopefully a better future.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. We appreciate it. Vanessa. All right, sure, we'll take Zoom questions.
We have two shout-outs, one from Vienna, Austria, from viewer who name disregard. And then we have Anna Raffel, who says that she's Juicy's youngest sister.
All right, we'll give
with her friends often. Her Reeves friends were so cool. So in a way, she was inspired to go to William and Mary because of her older sister's experience. And then we have another question from Ruth Liu. What makes you choose the career you have now? Is it more of a coincidence, or what were you convinced to do since graduating from William and Mary?
So maybe I'll just, for those on Zoom, Vanessa was saying we got regards from Vienna, Austria. We have a shout out from my sister who said she came to William Mary because I was so brilliant. And then, and Mr. Rathbone's daughter-in-law, of course. And then the question is, how did you all choose your career? Coincidence, accident, intentional?
So I thought I was going to be this cancer geneticist who's going like find cure for cancer or like something like that, and it didn't happen that way. As I said, my husband is a botanist, and then we just started working together, and then I'm now working on tree, and then it kind of evolved into from basic research, doing kind of phylogenetics, really kind of basic inquiries about evolution and type of very scientific stuff to what I'm doing right now, which is very basic, working with arborists, kind of evaluating. So the 2020 Chicago Region Tree Census is a comprehensive assessment of the value and benefits provided by trees in the Chicago region, so that we understand what the regional forest is made of, the species composition, and also the benefits that provide, so that we can provide those information for better management of the regional forest, because trees can do many wonderful things that we're not aware of, and yeah. And so I guess it just evolved organically. Yeah, so intention, at first it was like, I'm gonna go this path, but no, life is not life does not work that way. Yeah, at least that's for me. I don't know. Yeah.
Others on thoughts? Did you, when you were at William & Mary, did you choose this career path knowing you'll be here today, or was it an accident or coincidence?
Okay. No, I mean, I think about this a lot. I think it's always, it's always good to have a goal or, something that you think you might like to do. And I definitely thought I wanted to do something international. And I definitely also was interested in some kind of service. But I think it's good to have a sort of an idea of what you want to do. But as Chai-Shen says, you really don't ever know what it's going to be. And really in any job, even if it's not a very good job, you can always find something in it, right, that you're learning or something new about it. So definitely I think you can try to, ideally think through a path, but it definitely won't work out that way. And so it's good to just take each opportunity thinking about, what am I learning from this experience?
Well, like I said, I had no real plan, and it was kind of like being 25 years old and not having good options at that point. So I joined in the late 90s. When I was in the regular army, I served in Bosnia and Kosovo, which was a very meaningful experience because we were doing peacekeeping. It was very clear in what we were doing that by having stopped the wars in Bosnia and Kosovo, that there were many tens of thousands of people that were remaining alive because of it. I was in the regular army when 9/11 happened. I got out a year or two later, but then went into the Guard. And for me, it was always just the sense that I needed to know that I still belonged to all that. And it's really very much an idea that, other people are going to be going to go do this, that other units are going to be, other soldiers are going to be deploying to these places, and that you basically, choosing to go alongside of them. That really was what it worked out to for me. That's all I have on that.
John, thoughts?
It's really a great question, and so I have many strands of thoughts running through my mind. I suppose one way to look at it is after 4 years of learning Chinese at William & Mary, and then taking a trip to the Sackler Gallery in Washington, D.C., and I realized I still couldn't read everything, all the calligraphy. And it was just a feeling of being entirely inadequate. And so
I can read them too.
And so I think it's just was being motivated by a passion for intellectual curiosity. And I thought I would probably get a PhD in something. And now I barely received it because I had switched when I was living in Beijing. I was working for a real estate firm and market entry firm for 3 or 4 years. And so I had to leave that management, finance, real estate job to then come back to the United States, defend my dissertation, which I did successfully. And then I had left my job in Beijing and I could have returned to it. And I said, well, wait a second. I have been learning and studying my entire life. And the U.S. government paid for most of my PhD. And I figured I needed to really serve higher education at that time. And it is such a joy, of course, to have the opportunity and a privilege, really, to have the opportunity to work with college students.
Great, thank you. So thank you to our friends on Zoom for those questions. Just keep them coming. We're happy to hear from you on Zoom and in the room too. I think the question I have for you on behalf of all students, William & Mary students, is what jobs do you have? Your employers, where you work, what jobs do you have for current students, For new graduates, other categories of William & Mary alums, are you hiring and what do you have? And where can they go to find these jobs, more information about these jobs? And that goes for those on Zoom. If you have international jobs, if you could also post on Zoom where people can go, where students can go for more information. We'll check in with Vanessa too. So with that, Claire, maybe we'll start with Claire and work our way down.
Sure. So yeah, I'm really encouraging people to think about public service if you're a student. It's really just, the government is so big, there's so many different things you can do. People always ask me, doesn't the bureaucracy weigh you down? Bureaucracy is everywhere in every organization. So, and sometimes that bureaucracy is like a rule that actually, we want to protect. But yeah, so definitely, federal jobs are all posted on something called USA Jobs. And then there's one program for students coming out of either high school or undergraduate called the Pathways Program. So that is a way sort of into the government at the lower grades. And then there is the Presidential Management Fellow Program that I talked about that I did that is a competitive program when you're coming out of a master's degree program. It's really a great opportunity. And then I think if you're thinking about careers in international development, a lot of the jobs at USAID, we do require a master's degree. And definitely we're also looking for, sort of what I always try to tell people, try to get experience overseas any way you can. So there's lots of internship programs overseas. You can do the Peace Corps, that's really excellent experience. You can work for some of the NGOs that actually work on foreign assistance. That's also a great place to work to get that experience. And then I also, sorry, the mask is, I actually walked over, so there's the Global Research Institute here at William & Mary. That's definitely a place right there. They actually have a grant from USAID. And certainly careers and skills in data analysis and sort of monitoring and evaluation, that's definitely a place that our agency is certainly looking into, and all across the government, sort of like thinking about how to do data analysis and data visualization, because really more and more the government is trying to use evidence-based decision-making for policy. So I think that's really a great kind of like career track.
Sure. So I didn't do ROTC. My life would have taken a very different path if I had, but William & Mary, of course, does have a Reserve Officer Training Corps program, and that feeds both into active duty with the Army and reserve duty with the Army. It is possible to participate in ROTC without taking on a service obligation. It's up to a certain point, you can participate in ROTC without contracting or without receiving any sort of scholarship. That's not identical to what military service is like, but it does give some degree of familiarity and introduction to service. You have to be a United States citizen to become commissioned as an officer in the military. You can be a naturalized citizen and do that. It is possible for non-citizens, in some cases, to enlist in the military if they already have a residency status. And just a couple of things I want to add in general. So aside from actually serving in the military, I would encourage anybody that's looking at an international career to learn more about the military and about the military reserves. And the reason I say that is because the military plays a really huge role in our national, international engagement. And that's not just in terms of actual combat. When you use the word engagement in a military context, there's a whole spectrum of activities that includes. That includes humanitarian operations. That includes interactions with foreign governments at multiple levels. That includes military-to-military communications. That includes joint training opportunities. And I think Claire would probably attest to that from her time with USAID, is that there's a lot of international functions where the military in some ways is involved with it or is alongside in that. So, there's a lot of stereotypes. I think in the United States we don't do real well in our media culture of communicating what the military is actually like. There's a lot of stereotypes about what people are like in the military, and I basically can't watch anything out of Hollywood about the military because they get everything wrong. The people in the United States military are an incredibly diverse group of people. across all ethnicities, across the whole political spectrum. So the only way to get past those stereotypes is really to become more aware and actually talk to people, get to know people that are actually in the military, both in the active and the reserve component, to know what all that is about. Because at the end of the day, all of us as citizens in the country have a investment in what our military does, ultimately in our name.
So if you want a STEM job, you want to start a STEM job, go at a university or whatever, go talk to the professor and knock on the door, write email, and try to get a research position, a research assistantship, or a internship in the lab. Then in the botanical world, we are always looking for volunteers. If you enjoy working outside, doing some gardening, or volunteers who do restoration or anything, a lot of botanical gardens or arboretums, they do welcome, they do need volunteers to help with their work, because funding is actually pretty limited in some of this NGO. And then in terms of the more academic research at a higher level, for undergraduate, there is the REU programs, the Research Experience for Undergraduate programs, which is founded by the National Science Foundation. And I think it's limited to American students only. And these are research opportunities that is fairly competitive, but the students do get a pretty decent stipend for about 10 weeks of work. And in my organization, we also have programs for high school students, to kind of like just tag along and follow a researchers, and then we also have fellowship for scientists who are interested in tree science, and also senior scientists, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So internationally, the National Science Foundations do have. Occasionally, they do have the, for example, with China, there's NSF, NSFC, NSF China kind of collaboration program, and those are grant-based projects, and sometimes they do have fundings for graduate fellows to participate in the international exchange programs.
I would just echo what has just been said, and emphasize how important it is to be proactive in terms of understanding the resources that are available at your particular institution. So if it's William and Mary, there are many wonderful resources available to support independent research or research projects. And in this day and age, also, there are many ways in which you can connect virtually to potentially researchers around the world, labs around the world, NGOs around the world. And so maybe enter into conversations with your professors, your mentors, about what may be possible in terms of leveraging possibilities for research, international research experience, and international career exploration.
Great, thanks. And now to make a plug for the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. For those of you who are interested, there's 3 programs I wanted to mention. One is summer internships, and they are paid. So that's the recruiting process is going on right now. So if you're interested in working in Washington, D.C. with the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, that's an option. The second program we have is for research assistants. So if you're about to graduate, and you have an econ major, mathematics, statistics background, the Federal Reserve actually hires college grads for 2 years. You're a research assistant working with a Federal Reserve economist, doing an analysis and work with them. And the idea is that it's 2 years, because then after that you would go off to grad school. And then the third program, of course, is just ongoing hiring. As needs come up, we do hire, and then some of them are appropriate for new graduates. So I do hope you consider the Federal Reserve. I did bring Federal Reserve gifts, a little takeaways, so that you can remember. There is shredded cash. I don't recommend you paying tuition with the shredded cash, but it's out there to remind you about the option of the Federal Reserve. Any options on line, Vanessa?
No, but we have a conversation going on with one of our viewers who responded to Hosung, the viewer in Austria, who has experience working in the UN, and so he's curious about his career path. So they're currently conversing.
Okay, so for all those on Zoom, just so if you didn't hear, so Hosung Lee who's dialing in from Vienna, Austria, is working for the UN, and apparently other viewers figured that out and are talking online. So glad to make the connection. We're glad people are talking. That's the whole point of this. And so the last thing I would say is, in 2 words or less, if you could just say, what does Reeves mean to you, kind of along the lines of what Mr. Schatz asked. What does Reeves or your experience living here at Reeves mean to you? Or yeah. Taishan, going back.
2 words or less.
2 words or less. We're almost out of time.
Fun.
John?
Expanding the world. That's 3.
3 words. All right. Claire, you've got to beat that.
Colorful community.
Okay. Ken?
Air conditioning.
And I'm just going to put a heart up there. All right. So thank you so much to the Reeves staff for welcoming us back. Thank you to all of you for participating. And thank you to our panelists. Teresa?
Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you all so much. Your words are a real testament to intellectual curiosity and an openness to being in the world and working in the world, to the liberal arts, and along with some great practical advice. So we can't be happier that you're here today. Thank you again. There's a reception. I hope everyone will stay as long as you can and converse and get to know each other even more. But again, many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.